Hi, my name is Jess Montgomery. I'm the author of the Kinship Historical Mystery Series, and I'm so excited to be at the Ohioana Book Festival online this year in 2021. I'm coming to the book festival to chat about the third in my Kinship Mystery Series, The Stills. And I just wanted to share a little bit about the Stills with you. So it's set in 1927 and it's in rural southeastern Ohio, and it features Sheriff Lily Ross. She's been sheriff for a couple of years now. In real life, there was a female sheriff. The first female sheriff in Ohio in 1925 was a woman named Maud Collins, and she serves as the inspiration for my sheriff, Lily Ross. And of course, Prohibition has been in the background of all the books in the Kinship series so far, because Prohibition ran from January of 1920 to December of 1933 for almost 14 years. But Lily, as a native of southeastern Ohio and the Appalachian foothills, and as sheriff, knows that people have been running little stills in the hills and hollers for as long as she can remember, making moonshine. It's just been part of a way of life. But also, the county, predating the national law of prohibition going into effect in January of 1920, has been a dry county for many years. So this has just been a way of life for Lily and the residents of Bronwyn County. And because she's just one woman, has a few deputies that help her, she takes a very pragmatic view of prohibition in her county. So if somebody's brewing some moonshine for personal use and a couple of friends in the hills and hollers, she's not going to try to track every single one of those stills down. She's just not, because she can only handle so many things, and she wants to, to take care of the bigger crimes. But in the stills, as you can imagine from the title, prohibition comes to the forefront, particularly in the form of a gangster and bootlegger named George Vogel. Now, George Vogel has been in the first two books in the series, The Widows and The Hollows, as kind of a shadowy, overarching, looming figure. But in this novel, he comes to the forefront along with prohibition. And he's bringing into the county not just a small still, but true crime. He's bringing in gangsters and bootlegging, and it's going to bring mayhem and murder, and does bring mayhem and murder to her turf. And so she can't ignore it, because this isn't just, Uncle Arlie's brewing a little bit of moonshine that he's going to have on the weekend with a couple of friends. This is big time gangster trouble. And he also happens to be married to a woman named Fiona, who was widowed in the Widows, in the first book in the series, and shows up as a minor character in the Widows and in the Hollows. But I thought it would be interesting to kind of explore her. It's mentioned in my second book that she ends up living with and then married to George Vogel. And she's trying to kind of seek her fortune or a better life for herself and her son through marrying George Vogel. And George Vogel, by the way, is inspired by the real life gangster George Remus. So quite a character in the Prohibition era. And Fiona, his new wife, is aware of a farm that belonged to her aunt and uncle that they can get their hands on, and it can become kind of a staging area for how George wants to expand his operation. And so the narrators of the stills, in this case, because every novel is narrated by Lily and another member of the community, is Lily, of course, Sheriff Lily, and Fiona, George Vogel, the gangster's wife. And on the surface, they're very different women. So Lily is the sheriff. She believes in the rule of law. She, wants to set things right for her community when things go awry through the rule of law. She wants to make that equilibrium come back. And Fiona at first seems like a bit of a gold digger. But the truth of the matter is, though they're very different on the surface, there's a lot of similarity between the two women. They both want to have control of their own lives, and that's a challenge in uh, the 1920s for women. So they both want that, but they don't want to have control and power just for the sake of control and power. They want control and power so that they can ensure the safety and a good life for their children and for their loved ones. So they're similar in this way, bound in this way, and end up going toe to toe because of their different ways of trying to get to that same deep down goal. So I want to read to you just a little bit from the stills. A little bit from the very end of chapter 1, which is from Lily's point of view, and then from the very beginning of chapter 2, which is from Marvina's point of view. Starts out a little bit light. The novel gets darker as time goes on, but it opens on Thanksgiving, and Lily is in her kitchen with her mother, Mama, and her friend Marvina, who was the co-narrator in the first novel in the series, and who is a union organizer and a once upon a time moonshiner. So they've just been talking about grape juice bricks, the grape bricks being used to, which was a real thing, being used to create wine in a legal way through loopholes in the Volstead Act. The Volstead Act enforced prohibition. So Mama's digging around looking for her jug of wine at the end of chapter 1. Mama finally emerges from the cupboard. No broken jars at her feet, holding a gallon-sized canning jar filled with dark liquid. Mama's hair has now fallen completely loose from her bun, and her face is red and sweat-slicked, but she's grinning triumphantly. Lily laughs, sets aside her tea towel, and gets out 3 jelly jar glasses. Mama carefully pours dollops of the liquid in each glass, and each woman takes one. Here's to Lily being written up in thrilling gumshoe, Marvina says. Lily shakes her head. She'd solved a tough murder case last fall, and it had turned into a story in the popular detective magazine in an issue that had just come out. She's been teased and adulated far too much already over that. To Mr. Russo, then, Mama says. No, Lily snaps. Mr. Russo is a family friend. Whoops from the yard draw the attention of all 3 women. Together they stare out the kitchen window as Jolene scoops up a snowball and lobs it across the yard so that it lands right on top of her little brother Micah's head, while Caleb Jr. laughs at Micah's shock, until Jolene nails Caleb Jr., Mama's change of life baby, same age as Micah, square in the arm. Lily grins. Her girl is showing ever as many signs of athleticism and tomboyishness as she had. Many mothers would try to tamp that down. Mama had for a while, until Daddy told her to let Lily be. She'd overheard him say folks just have to be true to their nature, a sentiment Lily had reckoned as wise counsel. And so now Lily thinks of her own daughter. Good for her. Lily lifts her glass. How about a toast to all of our children? May they ever be joyous. Even as she says it, Lily's heart pangs and her grin fades. All of them, her, Mama, Marvina, had lost children. Life offers no guarantees, especially of perpetual joy. But Marvina and Mama lift their glasses, and then all 3 women drink the grape juice turned to wine. Well, it has a kick, but taste-wise, Lily had guessed right. It is like gulping pure vinegar. Lily glances at Marvina, who'd once made nearly 100 proof whiskey. Her mouth twists bitterly, upper lip almost touching her nose as she swallows. Lily would laugh, but Mama looks so disappointed that instead she says gently, "It's right tasty." Mama sighs. Well, I don't know about that. Maybe if I add some simple sugar syrup, a little bit of blackberry juice. Marvina flicks an eyebrow. Well, now, Mama MacArthur, you're going to turn into a right proper moonshiner yet. For a moment, silence hangs among the three women, sheriff, union organizer, and former moonshiner homemaker. Again, Lily wonders at Marvina's sudden good humor about alcohol. Maybe she's backsliding. But then Mama and Marvina burst out laughing, and Lily joins in. To friends, Marvina says. The women gulp down the rest of their wine. And then we switch to Fiona's point of view for the beginning of chapter 2, also on Thanksgiving morning. Is there anything more I can do for you, ma'am? Fiona Weaver Vogel looks up from her third frustrating attempt to tie the floral patterned French silk scarf into a proper bow over the low cleavage of her drop waist dress. In Cincinnati, she'd packed her most conservative clothing, and once she'd arrived at her aunt and uncle's farm in the southwestern corner of Bronwyn County, everything she'd brought seemed out of place, even scandalous. Thus her effort to correct the fashion blunder with a scarf she hadn't requested Clara pack for her. And yet she had found it this morning, the first morning since arriving 2 days before that she'd felt up to dressing, in her trunk. She'd felt both gratitude and irritation at Clara anticipating this need. Now Fiona turns away from the floor mirror to note Clara hovering in the doorway of her old bedroom that is, for now at least, hers again. As usual when regarding Fiona, the older woman's eyes narrow, her lips pinch into an insincere smile. From the point of view of Clara Schneider, longtime cook and housekeeper for Fiona's husband, George Vogel, Fiona is, as she'd overheard Clara tell another maid, a floozy, someone to tolerate until, inevitably, George gets rid of Fiona. Fiona couldn't seem to find any way to undermine Clara, not yet. The woman seemed as impervious as a cast-iron skillet. The only hint of vulnerability had come on the harrowing drive over. On a sharp turn, Clara's tote bag had fallen from her lap to the automobile floor, exposing neatly folded undergarments, a dress, a small bottle of cologne, and an old faded photo in a glass-covered frame of a woman, a man, and a little boy in a formal dress. Clara had snatched the photo up first, and Fiona had been too preoccupied with her own illness to ask about it, though it had struck her that the photograph must represent precious people and memories for Clara to travel with it. Fiona has an item like that, though she hadn't brought it on this trip. A cut glass candy dish with a chip off of one of the tendrils at the fluted edge. She knows right where it is, back at the Cincinnati mansion, tucked safely in a trunk. Now Fiona shakes her head to clear it of thoughts of that dish, and Fiona's ball falls apart, as if the scarf sides with Clara, whose smile pinches even more tightly as she looks pointedly at Fiona's cleavage. Heat rises in Fiona's already flushed face. Why can't she tie a simple scarf this morning? Yes, her hands shake from perpetual hunger brought on by morning sickness. This is the first morning in a week she'd been able to keep anything down, just tea and dry toast. The thought of eggs remains nauseating. But truth be told, her nervousness comes from anticipating the conversation she's planning to finally have with her Aunt Nell. Best to stiffen her spine before facing the old judgmental woman. Maybe practice with this one. Fiona squares her shoulders, gives Clara a full smile as she turns her own pointed look at what Clara is holding, Fiona's chamber pot. That's fine. Your hands are full as it is. So that's your introduction to our dual narrators. Lily, who's a bit softer, at least in our introduction to her, and Fiona, who's not particularly warm and fuzzy, at least in our introduction to her. So thank you for listening to my little preview of the stills. I look forward to discussing historical fiction on a panel at Ohioana's festival this year, and I look forward to all the panels and events for Ohioana, and I hope that you'll enjoy all the wonderful things that Ohioana has planned for us. Thank you very much. Take care. Be safe.